Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Mindy Wright, a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and Director of the nonprofit Higher Education Alliance. It's really great to see everybody here today. Today, CMC is brought to us with support from Nationwide Children's Hospital and in partnership with Children's Hunger Alliance, both of whom have many friends and associates in the audience. Won't you please help me thank them? Hunger is a scourge that we don't think should be a problem in our nation, but the truth is that it's a really big problem. Far too many children, urban, suburban, and rural, go to bed hungry and wake up hungry. 1 in 5 Ohio children don't know where their next meal will come from. How is it possible for them to learn, grow, and become productive in our society if they don't have access to healthy, nutritional food? This is the challenge we address today. So please welcome President and CEO of Children's Hunger Alliance, Judy Mobley. Director of Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services, Joy Bivens. CEO of Action for Children, Eric Karolek. CEO of Groundwork Ohio, Shannon Jones. And Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Cardinal Health, DeVray Kirkland. DeVray is going to provide opening remarks about the Hunger Impact Report funded by the Walmart Foundation, and then Shannon will lead the conversation.
Thank you so much, Mindy. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be here to speak with you today, and certainly to be able to kick things off about this very important topic that we see in the state of Ohio that's impacting so many of our children. I served on the Children's Hunger Alliance Governing Board for 6 years. I've been affiliated for 10, so this is like coming home for me in a lot of ways. There's so many familiar faces, and it's so great to see everyone here. Each of you have a copy of the report at your seat, so hopefully you have an opportunity to take a look at that. The state of childhood hunger, creating a full future, of Ohio's children. One of the things that's really important, certainly about the Walmart Foundation, is that there's several highlights in the report, and Children's Hunger Alliance over the past 3 years has done some work that we are excited to share with you. Walmart made a significant donation of $3.5 million to help the fight against childhood hunger in our state, and to me, that needs a round of applause just for doing that. The funding was part of a commitment from the Walmart Foundation to relieve hunger in America. Their goal is to provide 4 million meals to those in need and nutrition education to 4 million people through grants, donations, and food between 2014 and 2019. The Children's Hunger Alliance was one of 11 recipients of this funding, but we were the only state agency to be awarded funding. All other recipients were national organizations. Next month, Walmart will bring all the organizations that they funded together to share their accomplishments. The impact report that you have in front of you highlights many areas of hunger relief that the funding made possible, so I'd like to just touch on a few. We did a needs assessment in the first year and assess an asset mapping project in year 2. We were able to begin a pilot program working with childhood centers, and for the first time to help them serve the children healthy meals that meet USDA standards while also getting reimbursed for the cost of healthy food. We implemented a self-stable meals and after-school programs to serve as a backup meal and the food vendor was delayed or more children were planned that attended. And also in rural areas where the need is great and finding a food vendor is sometimes difficult. We were also able to start a nutrition education program for children in childhood centers called Eat, Play, Grow, helping teach them about healthy food to build healthy habits. I want to mention other areas that made a significant impact on children referred to as mini grants. And these mini grants are small amounts of funding provided by other organizations like schools to jumpstart programs, such as piloting breakfast in the classroom or helping to outfit a bus to be used for mobile feeding in the summer. You'll be able to read about the impact mini grants that have had an impact on hunger children through specific examples in the report. The report was written and helped by Gebbing Communications, and the graphics were done by Zoco Design, so we'd like to thank them for their support. I hope you find it informative and further understand the critical issue of childhood hunger and how important the work of our panelists and the respective organizations is to the children in our community and state. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for participating. Now I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today to help facilitate the conversation on this really exceptional piece of work. So with that, I think we should just get started. And I'll start with you, Judy, because since you've been sort of leading this effort, but I'd like for all of the panelists to chime in now that everyone's had a chance to review the report. What would you say is the one statistic or piece of information that really jumped out of the report for you?
There's obviously a lot of important things in this report, but for me, the success that we see in Newark City schools really is just striking. And it's a perfect example. If you find one person in a school, whether it's a librarian, the janitor, the superintendent in this case, Doug Ute, the superintendent of Newark City Schools, was committed to increasing breakfast participation in their schools. And if you look at the report, you'll see that when they started a few years ago working with us, they had about a 30% participation rate. And fast forward a couple years, and they're now over 70%. And what that really means is if you look at the numbers in the report, initially about 200,000 meals a year were being served, and now over 560,000 meals. So obviously more than doubled, almost tripled. The other thing for me is if you read the part about Newark, what it does is it jumpstarts a school. So now they are interested in helping their kids in the summer. So this past summer, they took a school bus, they took some school buses, they went to 21 sites, 2 days a week the month of June. So again, started small with the pilot, but they're committed now to feeding 5 days a week next summer to all the kids in their district. So again, really exciting to see them take it and run with it. And then our work is done. We can go help somebody else. So
great. Joy, how about you?
You know, for me, it's always human impact. I look at all the data, and there's phenomenal data in this report. I believe it's 48% of the centers are even aware of the feeding program, which if that increases will be phenomenal. But of course, we don't want to inundate your system, Judy. But for me, actually, and I don't know what page this is on, there's a young lady in Meigs County, and it's in your report, and if I can just really quick, she wrote a letter to thank the Hunger Alliance on the feeding program, and I believe she was receiving meals from the minivan approach. So she wrote, "I just wanted to let you know that you have helped me and my family out tremendously. We also want to thank you for setting up the program for families like us. This summer was hard, but because of you in your program, we at least knew that we had food." You know, many times as adults, we shoulder our burdens and our weight, but we really, when we go through processes like that, children are impacted as well. She owned her family's hardship, so this program alleviated some of that family hardship that she was experiencing. So for me, I'm thinking about the other children who receive some, reprieve from this program. So that really impacts me.
That's a great point. How about you, Eric?
Words, numbers. I'm going to go with a number, which is on page 8, I think it is in the report. The 58% decline in family child care over the last 20-odd years, and the corresponding, perhaps, a 34% increase in center-based child care or participation. I'm not sure which is the actual number in the report. I think that's an important number. It struck me because it is both very revealing and potentially misleading. Not misleading as it's wrong, no, the report's really very solid, but misleading because it might lead us to a conclusion that's not accurate. So it's revealing because it tells you something about the child care that families need and want and the difficulties of child care providers in meeting those needs. And we need to be attentive to where children are. It's always good to ask the question, where are the children? It leads you down roads towards right solutions. And if children aren't being met at the family child care provider and instead are in center-based situations, what we do might need to change. So it's revealing, and there's a lot more to that, and we should discuss that, I think, at some length. It's also potentially misleading, because that 54 or 58% decrease, it's not like those people completely checked out and those children aren't being served. That's a decrease in participation in the child and adult care food program, which in Ohio and most places now, I think everywhere, requires providers to be licensed. So, and some of that, not all of it, but some of that decrease in family child care providers, that's the person providing child care from their home down the street, is actually individuals going, we call it underground. They're coming off the licensed rolls. They're no longer eligible for publicly funded child care support that goes to families through organizations like Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services. But there's still children being served somewhere. And so we need to be attentive to what the experience of those children are in those settings. They haven't disappeared. So that's the revealing and misleading kind of percentage that I latched onto from the report.
Great, thank you all for that. Joy, we'll start with you for this question. You know, the reports really reflects out the impact of hunger on children in the early years. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how hunger impacts children outside of the early childhood development space. Are there other areas of their lives, and recognizing that children are parts of family units, their families' lives that you've seen touched by hunger?
Absolutely. I think that, many of you who are boots on the ground in this room, thank you for all that you do. But when you see children who are being, suspended at age 4 from child care centers, my question is, there used to be a time when a traumatic event was seeing someone killed or having a parent die. Adverse child experiences now is hunger. And I'm wondering, do children act out in school because they are hungry? I would say yes, right? So you're seeing that. I've been in communities in this county, and, I'm not going to put any, I'm not going to say what the area was, but I've been in communities in this county where children dig out of trash cans. So, so we see it in disciplinary, we see it in, again, in the acting out, in classrooms. We see it with their grades, they're not able to achieve. I know how I get when I'm not hungry. I mean, we always call it hangry, right? But can you imagine for a child, right, going to school and then expecting to concentrate all day and then behave, and I call it my sugar gets low. Right? And you get angry, right? And you're not able to concentrate. So we see a lot of that because of, with our agency, since, I have wonderful commissioners, Commissioner Boyce, Commissioner Brown, and Commissioner O'Grady. So I'm not going to try not to say anything that's going to embarrass them today or get me fired. But the work that we do, we're in the community a lot. So we are able to interface with a lot of youth in different capacities of life, and this is what we're seeing.
Great. How about you, Eric?
Boy, that was great. I'm not sure I can add a whole lot to it, but I will say that I think it's important to keep in mind that children in child care centers or family child care homes, they don't just show up. Mm-hmm. They're rooted in families that are facing all kinds of difficulties, not just hunger, but access to affordable housing, a host of issues that often are the ACEs, scores of factors, and that those families then are rooted in neighborhoods. And so the things that we see, the things that need to be addressed aren't just individual, they are also familial, they're neighborhood, and we need to be thinking at a sort of broader scope than one child, one hungry child.
A couple things I'd like to add. I guess if you turn to the very back part of the report, you'll see something from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they just talk about overall health for the children. You know, they're sick more often. They certainly go to the nurse's office at school more often. Our nurses that we talk to in the schools that we work with would tell us that it's more often on a Monday morning when they know they haven't had anything over the weekend. And a lot of times the nurses will keep stuff in their drawer. So they open their drawer and will have a granola bar or something to be able to provide the child so they can go back to school. The other thing I want to mention is just recently, a couple of my staff have had the opportunity to start having conversation with Department of Corrections. And really, unbeknownst to me, they provide a lot of services to nonprofit free of charge. So that's what we're talking to them about. But one of the interesting statistics that was brought to my attention was that a child that's lived in hunger is 2 times more likely to be violent to other people. So that may seem a little far-fetched to be thinking about, you know, we're talking about early childhood hunger, but it does have long-lasting effects on the children, and not to even mention the emotional impact. I think about summer, and we always say that during the school year, kids have at least the consistency of knowing they've got breakfast and lunch available. And then this summer, they take on that added burden of worrying about when am I going to get to eat next. So it takes an emotional toll on them also.
Good point. So, Eric, I'll start with you because you really sort of raised or provoked this issue about the obstacles that exist. So we know that there's a problem. We see that there are some potential successful solutions out there. But you briefly touched on some of the obstacles, like, well, a lot of kids aren't in the publicly funded child care system. What are some of those other obstacles that you're experiencing that relate to this
Right.
challenge?
So I should mention that Action for Children has for over 4 decades been providing food assistance, food and nutrition supports to family child care providers. We do that by administering the Child and Adult Care Food Program here in Franklin County and providing not only funding for nutritious meals and snacks, but also technical assistance, coaching, and other supports to family child care providers. And some of our folks are in the room. You do awesome work. Thank you. We serve about 175 providers, nearly 2,000 children, about 750,000 meals and snacks a year. And in that experience, there are a ton of problems, ton of challenges. They are similar to actually challenges we see on the education front. Step Up to Quality, we'll talk about that. And they begin with an under-resourced sector. Especially when you're talking about family child care, these are one-woman shows. This person is in charge of everything for up to 5 unrelated children every day, and for many long hours, including non-traditional hours, overnight even. And the reimbursement rates that the state provides to family child care providers are embarrassingly low. They have only increased the base rate once in about the last 10 years, if I remember correctly. And that makes it just very challenging. If you equate that to an hourly wage, it's far below the minimum wage and far below the oft-cited statistic for the wage of a child care center teacher, which is about $20,000 a year. And so those individuals have very little to work with in terms of supports for their program. Part of the reason the Child and Adult Care Food Program that is part of the subject of this report is so important is that it brings additional resources to the child care providers so they can provide healthy meals and snacks. Another burden that they face is administrative and regulatory. Now, I'd never argue against regulations in child care. Health and safety regulations when you're talking about caring for and educating young children is crucial. But how we implement those and the administrative burdens we place on child care providers, especially family child care providers, one-woman shows, right, is really important. In my past life, I used to be a lobbyist, and I represented child care providers.
Careful, we've got a few over a table.
Coming from a former state legislator,
Who's now a lobbyist.
And I represented child care providers in various states and also at the federal level. And when lobbying on the child and adult care food program, I used to go by Senator Harkin's office. He was the chair of the Department of the Senate Agriculture Committee, a senator from Iowa, with a stack of administrative papers that a medium-sized child care center in Des Moines, Iowa had to complete every month, inch and a half every month. One thing wrong on those could mean reduced payment to that center for resources that it already expended on behalf of poor and needy children. And so the administrative burden is really significant. As a sponsor agency, Action for Children helps alleviate some of that burden for family child care providers and support them in meeting it, but that's a significant factor. I feel like I'm talking a lot. There are a lot of other issues, and I'm happy to go at length, but others might have other obstacles.
Judy, anything to add?
I feel like I have a few things I could add, but I feel like I need to give that to Joy because we're really right at the step up to quality point. There are some issues. I guess maybe what I would say is enough quality childcare would be one of the obstacles, and the step up to quality that's coming to us in the near future is really going to have an issue, really going to have an impact on that.
Yeah. So is that my cue? Okay, good. So I'm going to try not to embarrass my bosses, and I'm going to try to cliff note this thing because there's a lot of, Eric will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, so I don't have to worry about that. So as many of you know, in 2020, every child care center in Franklin County, home and center, must be star rated, meaning it goes beyond licensure. And there's 5 categories they can receive stars in. We at Franklin County, and through the commissioner's efforts, now this was a mandate that came out, I believe, Eric, in 2014, 2015, through the legislator, through the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and the Ohio Department of Education. This was a non-funded mandate. Well, what does that mean? That means when I went to the state to ask them how they were going to roll this out, and if they were going to give me dimes for stamps to send out to every provider to let them know, they said, no, this is not how that works. You have to get boots on the ground and make sure that your providers in your community know that this is coming, which a lot of them did. Thank you through the work through our partner from Action for Children. But we at Job and Family Services decided we needed to take a different approach, and also our commissioners felt that we needed to make sure that we were involved in this in a very intricate way. So what we did was we partnered with the organization to look at data, of course, because we all like data, and we allow start with data, which is good. And what we found was this. If today was 2020, 33,000 of my children who receive publicly funded child care services, 22,000 of them would lose their slot if today was 2020. 68% of those children are African American who live in the lowest asset neighborhoods in this county. So our commissioners decided, we got to be even more aggressive about this. We have great partners. So what we did was we partnered with the organization. We have a trainer who trains our centers on Saturdays. So that means that administrators do not have to be in their buildings. They can come on Saturdays. We have an app that we created, and we also have an online module. And what it does is it builds that application to get them to the front door of the state so that the state can come out and accredit them for their star. We also, last month, we've been going door to door. We've been doing unannounced visits through the efforts of Commissioner Brown. She wanted to make sure that we were really, really engaged, and she said, okay, it's time to come from behind the desk. And we went door to door, walking into centers unannounced who didn't have stars. And not as a police, but to say, we need your help. We need you to have these stars. Because if you don't, and I thank you for this report, Judy, because it allowed me to see it from a different perspective. If this is the only meal these children are receiving, we need to make sure that they continue to receive those meals until we deal with really what the core issue is of why they're hungry, which we know is non-livable wages, affordable housing, mental health issues. But until then, these are things that we have to do. So that is what we're doing. We're working with the state is probably sick of me, and they probably want me to go away. But But they've been great partners, even though, the way that it came down to the legislator, I don't know how all that works, and there's some smarter people that can tell me. But that's what we're doing, and we're being aggressive about it as Franklin County, again, working with our partners. So I'll ask each and every one of you, please duplicate the message. If they need information, Bart, will you stand up? I know, Shannon, this isn't my show. Stand up, Bart. We will send you a communication packet. We need you to talk to every home provider. This is the providers who've been Big Mama for 10 years, and all they did was want to love kids and feed them meals and sing to them. They have to have a star.
Yeah.
And their reimbursement goes up with every star that they receive. I'm sorry, Judy.
Nope, I'm going to jump in on you. As Eric said, they are a sponsor, and we are too, and so we have almost 800 in-home providers that we service and work with. And just this past week or so, my staff that are in the audience were able to provide me some of the data, and only 36% of our roughly 800 in-home providers have 1 star. I actually was thrilled to see that about 11 of them had 5 stars, so it's definitely doable. But back to Eric's point about the rules and regulations, many times we find it's just overwhelming, that's a great word, overwhelming to them when they look at the paperwork that's required. So some of what our staff will be doing, Joy and her team probably can handle Franklin County. They've got a great plan and they're out there. We're worried about the small counties that maybe nobody, in government is worrying about them and going out to help them. And we know those kids need safe, quality daycare just as much as everybody else. So we'll be working on that, right, guys, who's in the audience? It's at the top of the list because 2020 is coming. January 2020 is when this has to take effect.
June 30th.
June 30th?
Yeah.
I thought it was January. I apologize.
It's July. July 1, 2020.
Okay, stand corrected.
And 24% of the centers in Franklin County have stars. So that means you can't just pick your kid up and take them to another center because there's not a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, this is a really interesting conversation as somebody who was formerly a recovering legislator and now kind of sits on the other side. Yeah, because now I can behave as if facts really do matter because they do. So I'm just. This is a real issue that you all are fleshing out, is that there's this mandate and there's this bureaucratic process and so forth. But I'm wondering if you all could comment about the need for the quality. So we sometimes in our conversations focus on the hardship in attaining a star, but the star isn't just to get the star is not the goal.
Right.
Joy, you sort of mentioned that one of the goals is we now know there are all these children that are hungry, and one of the ways to feed them is through this step-up process. I'll start with you again, Eric. If you could talk a little bit about, and Judy's used the phrase quality childcare, how that relates to step up, and what does that actually mean for us? That's the goal. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked it at that sort of fundamental level. So you're all familiar with the K-12 system, and you know that that's an institutional system. There are districts. There's a lot of funding there, not enough by many people's accounting. The early childhood world doesn't look anything like that. It's much more atomized. We don't have 1,600 districts. We have thousands of providers in one state. In this county alone, we have just over 1,000 child care providers. So it's much more atomized. It's a private market. It's not an institutional or government provided, although the government provides plenty of funding for it. It's not a government program, right?
But some.
Yeah.
Not plenty.
Not plenty, thank you. Yes, not enough. But it's a private marketplace. And as such, just about anything can go. It's very easy to enter the child care marketplace. You don't have to have meet a lot of requirements. You have to have a high school equivalency. You don't have to have any specialty in early childhood education. You don't have to have any understanding of child development. So easy entry means that we are constantly in a state of trying to fix that marketplace. Most people know that it is very expensive, even for well-to-do individuals, and so it's a challenge. And the state state's Step Up to Quality Rating and Improvement System is an effort to enter into that marketplace, that private marketplace, create a structure, a scaffold for parents and also for government funders to understand the relative quality of programs in that marketplace. And to put a base, now comes July 1st, 2020, and let me assure you it is July 1st, 2020, to put a base of common understanding of what minimum quality is. And so that's a really good thing. There's a lot of very poor quality childcare that children are receiving. In the case of Step Up, that program is not a fully funded program. The state has tried to focus resources to higher rated programs, but it's still not fully funded. Groundwork a few years ago did a cost study that showed the gap between current funding levels and those required to be able to actually sustainably deliver the program. And those 5-star programs that we see in our community, and we have a number in Central Ohio, they often have additional supplemental funding that makes it possible for them to meet the higher standards. But I don't want to make it sound like this is Mount Everest. We have under 21 months, and the clock is our enemy, not dollars too, but the clock especially is our enemy. But this is a doable thing. In Franklin County, for example, the gap in terms of the number of providers who are rated and unrated, it's not a good percentage, but it's 200 family child care providers, give or take a few. 200. We can do that. We can do that when we put our minds together, when government and private sector join together and create the resources, when our county leads with a PR campaign, unlike anything else in the state, to make providers even more aware and the parents who are going to those providers begin to think about what quality looks like. That's a doable thing. So if we concentrate on what the numbers actually look like and look to data about where those child care providers are, and Action for Children is the agency that's leading in this work in Central Ohio. We have sister agencies around the state that are united through the Ohio Child Care Resource and Referral Association to also provide these supports. And if we can target the ones that have the largest number of our publicly funded children, we can do this. 10% of providers have 40% of the affected children. So this is a doable thing. It's not easy. I'm counting on private support coming through from, some of you may be familiar with the Columbus Foundation's Our Kids campaign that's going on right now. And I know that our business sector and our government sector are committed to making sure that that goal is reached, because our children deserve nothing less than this minimum standard of quality that is in Step Up to Quality.
So Joy, you're responsible for not just the child care effort in your county, a whole host of efforts that are really designed to lift people up and out of poverty. So my question again is, why does quality matter? So why is there this effort on quality as opposed to babysitting, for example? And I use the example that you used, which is, quality is where we get some of these food programs, both to be funded and to have the support to do it. What are the other sorts of benefits of this bureaucracy we keep talking about to move childcare into quality?
I just believe it's basic education. What we know is that if children have the basic, fundamental, foundational structure at an early age, upon entering into a elementary system or a higher level education system, that they are prepared. And I believe that then when this is before me. I keep saying that I'm new so I don't get fired. I believe that when these rules were set, someone said, you know what really helps kids and really what helps families move out of poverty is education. So if we can, when we look at the data for, we always go back to the third grade reading guarantee. When we look at the data, what do we need to do before they get to third grade? So this was an effort, I believe, to assist in that, because we believe that this is where it's going. But if I can just add this really quick, because I hear this in our county a lot. We always say we don't have enough quality seats. To me, that's a value judgment statement. This is the reason why. We have trained in our doors 355 professionals. 55% of the top 100 centers have been through our system. Until we get to the point where it is 90%, 95% who have gone through the vetting process to step up to quality, I can't tell you that we don't have enough centers or enough quality seats, because every center hasn't gone through the process. And what we find is many of them are already doing what it takes to be step up to quality certified. They just have to get engaged in a process. And I agree with you, Eric. There are centers who are not providing quality care. But when that value statement is out there and I'm just, popping up like a nosy next door neighbor at these centers' doors saying, hey, they're looking at me like you're going to shut me down because you've already said that, you don't have enough quality seats and I'm not engaged, so I'm not engaged in a process, so I'm not quality.
Okay, so Judy, I'm going to go back to you, but before I do, I have been told that there are lots of people who ask lots of questions in this group. So there's a microphone over there, so I hope you'll take some time to line up if you have some specific questions. But with that, I guess my last question, and I want to start with you, Judy, as the lead on this effort, is to put forward a report is one thing. What is the real takeaway in terms of next steps? What are the action steps that you really see moving forward, and who might engage in this effort?
Yeah. Well, as you get a chance to read the report, you'll see that the funding we received from Walmart allowed us to do a lot of new things that our agency would have never been able to do but for that, transformational funding that we received. So for us, the challenge is to be able to continue to find funding and continue to grow and continue to sustain the work that we've done. I want to get a quick plug in for something that is really important to us. We've done a lot of work this past 8-9 months on some legislation with Representative LaTourette and Representative Lips called Breakfast After the Bell. So it is not a mandate, but it was introduced as House Bill 734 September 25th, so it's very recent. For us, when you think back to the Newark example I gave you, that is a sustainable way for us to help these children. It doesn't take more funding and different funding and new funding every year. Once the school's engaged and those kids start receiving the meals really as part of their school day, we see the ripple effect. They are more attentive in class. The teachers have less disruption and less discipline problems to deal with. It really is a win-win situation for everybody. So for us, it will be trying to continue to grow on what this funding has been able to let us start. We piloted child care centers. There's a huge need for child care centers to be feeding their kids good quality food. They're doing the same thing that the in-home providers are doing, only in our case, when we think about what it takes for us to be a sponsor for an in-home person that might have 5 kids, it takes the same administrative work to go to a daycare center that might have 50 kids. So for us, being able to reach the most kids, a daycare center allows us to do that with less overhead. So those of you that know me, I'm a CPA, and so I have gone at this business of Children's Hunger Alliance with a mindset of, if I do this in the most efficient way, when somebody gives us $1 to do this work, they can depend on the fact that we're going to use it in the way it was intended. And so we just hope we can continue to do the work that we've been able to start with this Walmart money.
Joy, how about you? Where do you see sort of the next steps? How will you utilize this report maybe in talking with stakeholders and others to advance the agenda?
For me, selfishly, Judy, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to throw you in here too, Eric. I think that, as we're going out trying to engage these centers and step up to quality, many times as, providers, we work in silos. I know that's not a fun word, but we kind of do. I do my own thing. Someone else does their own thing. I would would like to see is we're going out talking to providers about becoming Step Up to Quality certified. I would like to inform them about what is going on with the Hunger Alliance. And again, not to inundate your program, because I know there's limited dollars in that, but I think awareness is important. So now that I know, is there an opportunity for one of your staff persons to come out to some of our trainings to have that conversation? So my thing in this is to duplicate the message.
Eric.
So I think there are a couple of things. So one thing is, and when you're doing that, also remind them that we do the Child and Adult Care Food Program at Action for Children as well. It's important, though, you know, I'm not a hunger person. I'm a child care guy and been so for almost 30 years now. And so I can't turn away from those family child care providers who are themselves close to poverty. Many of them are eligible for assistance, and who serve maybe 5 kids at a time, but up to 20, 30 kids in the course of a day or a week. And they do so at times that our city needs child care, in the evenings, in off-hour cares for bus drivers, construction workers, retail, warehousing. And we have to be able to support them in an as efficient way as possible in having access to the healthy meals and snacks that the program makes possible. So we have to stand up for child care providers in every way we possibly can. I like to say, you can't move the needle for babies if you aren't willing to move the needle for the people who care for them every day. So a second thing is, you know, in thinking about, you know, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which Action for Children does here locally and Children's Hunger Alliance does around the state, it's one piece. It's something that allows a parent who can't take care of their child's food needs on their own to know that for the next 10 hours, we got it. Child care providers can say that if they're in the food program. But, you know, after that, there's another 14 hours of the day, and there's the weekend. And I've met too many providers who send extra food home on Fridays, knowing that there's not enough over the weekend, or who know they've got to put the food out right away on Monday because that's when the kids are hungriest. And so there's much more that even through our programs isn't being accomplished. And that's why I think it's important for each of you to be thinking about the food supports beyond child care that are in our community. So food banks and other resources that help families stand up on their own with appropriate supports in those hours when their children aren't at a child care center or family child care home.
Great. Thank you. So I know, in keeping with tradition now, we're going to turn it over to some questions. We just ask very succinct questions and leave the editorial comment to a minimum so that we can get through as many as possible. And if you'd please state your name before asking your question.
Hi, Andy Campbell with the Metropolitan Club. Thank you for being here. I remember we did this topic a couple years ago, and one of the key things that came up was that there were some rules and regulations, I guess health and safety, about schools being allowed food to leave the premises. And I always thought, you know, oh my gosh, what happens, especially like on storm days, if the kids are stuck at home and their only meals are coming from the school. Has there been any progress in emergency food supplies or the ability for kids to be able to take food home with them from these distribution points? Thank you.
You want to take that one, Eric?
You look like you might have an answer.
Well, just really quick, I'm sorry. I'm not aware of that rule. I'm sure there was that rule, but just because of, you know, people getting sick. But I know that there are certain schools and certain districts who actually pack up food for kids even over Christmas, Thanksgiving, in long breaks, in addition to the food that they serve after school. So I believe that they are, but I believe that is, and I don't know if it's Mid-Ohio Food Bank, because I don't want to put you guys on a spot either, but I don't know where, I don't know if it's donated through their communities, but there are several districts that we've been engaged with who actually provide that type of a service for their students.
And I'm going to try and answer. My after-school team will probably correct me, but one thing in the after-school programs with the child and adult food care, this past year, it used to be that if we had meals that there weren't kids there to eat, we put them on a shared table. So if somebody wanted a second meal, they could certainly have it. But if there were bananas left over, say, or an apple, the children could not take those home with them. So that is changed now. There are certain components of that meal that the kids can take home. So right away, my staff heard me say, okay, great, then I want to send fresh fruit every day, because at least I know if there's extra meals, that's not going to go to waste and somebody will take it home with them. So that is a change that was for the better.
Great. Next question.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and my question is, Ms. Bevins, could our community service meet with you or someone at Franklin County and Family Services? We all want to help.
Absolutely. Do you see that guy right there in front of you? His name is Bart. Go see Bart, and he will hook us up sooner than later, Bart. All right. Thank you.
Good question. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sherry Chaney-Jones with Measurement Resources. I want to thank you for this presentation. I think at first I didn't understand how childhood hunger and child care link together, but thank you for, I think, educating all on that. This question is more around the quality childhood piece, and I'm curious if the data are available or if there are plans to start to look at how the Step Up to Quality ratings, if it is equating and correlating to early childhood readiness and early outcomes, or if it more is just a compliance-based program. What are the kind of the current developments and future plans for that?
Yeah. There is, and you should know that the Step Up, the domains and the criteria in the domains were developed over a couple of years with, and then are research-based. And there was input from, I wasn't here at the time, but there was input from folks in DC and from early childhood researchers around the country. So there's a good grounding to it. And recently, the state did a validation study. There have been a couple others in other states, and they've all indicated that there is a strong correlation between the programs that have step-up ratings and the early childhood results of particular children. So kindergarten readiness scores. Now, that's true, and that's good, and that's part of the reason why this is a worthwhile effort. But even if that weren't true, there's still something to be said about walking into the wild west of the child care marketplace and creating some assurances that parents can have, that funders like Director Bivens can have, about where those dollars are going, how they're being used, and that they are moving in a direction that is a smart and efficient. Program administration is one of the domains, and that are also leading to child outcomes. So we have staff requirements that have also been borne out through research to correlate with higher quality and better child outcomes, staff requirements. And so there are elements of it that even if that validation study had come back with some negative result, I'd still feel quite comfortable saying this is a good path for our community and our state to be on.
Joy, did you look like you had something you wanted to add?
Eric covered it. Yeah, no. I was gonna, no, he's good.
Great. Well, I'm wondering if, do we have another question? Yeah, please, step up.
Hi, I'm Lainey Cuthbert from the Columbus Metropolitan Club. At one point, I was a volunteer at the Dublin Food Pantry, and I know when I would be in there stocking the shelves, occasionally we would have a family come in, and we had no record that they were coming, and we would have a special box that we would give them for the weekend or whatever. Is there a possibility that a child without a parent is able to walk into a food pantry and receive that same box?
You might have to defer to our Mid-Ohio Food Bank friends in the audience.
Sorry, Marilyn.
Well, maybe we can get the answer to that question after the presentation today. But thank you for that. That's certainly a good question.
I think, let me add one thing. I think that's really when we get asked the question, how are you different from the food bank? That's really what it boils down to. A child who has adults that are caring for them and concerned about that they have the right food will go to the food bank and get it. And so in the after-school programs that we work with and that others work with around the state, that's what we're trying to do, make sure the children who don't have food at home that night have that last meal of the day. And we work really hard to make sure it's a hot meal. That's not always possible in some of the rural areas of our state, but we know that we're trying to take care of the kids many times who don't have that parent or guardian to help them.
Great, thank you for that. I guess my closing question would be to you all that, reports always do a great job of elevating the awareness of a problem, and you certainly highlight possible solutions to the problem, which is really great for people who are in the policy-making roles who are here today, Joy. But what I guess my question is based off one of the earlier audience questions, is everybody whose conscience is raised about an issue, they want to engage. So what is the one thing that the average person who's not in childcare, that's not in the JFS, who doesn't work in government, what is the one thing that an average person can do today? What is the call to action to them to help alleviate childhood hunger? We'll start with you, Judy.
Well, I have a couple, I guess. First of all, when I mentioned the breakfast legislation, it's so important to these kids in our state. So I would ask you to reach out to your representatives and your senators when this bill goes to, gets introduced, right? And when we get to start giving testimony on it, it's just critical for the kids in our state. The other thing, I hate to say, but we need financial support. Every year for at least Children's Hunger Alliance, we feel like we're starting over. It's like owning your own small business and you don't really sell anything. You just have to convince people that the work you're doing is worthwhile. So we start over every year. And so if you can find it in your heart to think that this is an important issue, please, not just to Children's Hunger Alliance. We have a lot of human service agencies in the audience with us today, all very worthwhile causes. So we all need your support financially. Right?
Joy?
So Judy covered the give. You can't give us money, of course. I see one of my policy people, Commissioner Brown's, Mike Cochran. I can't take money, but we give money. But please make sure that you, as you're making your individual campaigns every year, make sure that you give to organizations like the Children's Hunger Alliance and other organizations in the room. The other thing for the average person, for me, Shannon, is we have to duplicate the message. And not just, many times we make rules within four walls of a building, and then we expect it to get down to the neighborhood. The neighborhoods I'm referring to where these children live and parents live and, providers are. We need people to duplicate the message, to blanket this county, to say, please make sure that you get that star. If you get that star, it increases your reimbursement, and we know that children will at least eat while they're in that provider's care.
Real quick, Eric.
I actually have two things. One, we can't vote for the CEO of Walmart, but all that money for the child and adult care food program, that comes through the Senate. And so we can vote for who our elected leaders are and how much they fund this program, and more funding will help us meet more children. The other thing is you either have or know someone who has a small child who's in a child care program, and that program, I'm sure, has needs. And so I would urge you to volunteer with them. We are hosting next, if I may, in 2 weeks, a celebrity spelling bee where each of the contestants will be competing on behalf of an local early childhood program. And that is just one way. You have other individual ways to help individual providers meet the unmet needs that they have.
Thank you. And with that, we'll just turn it back over to you, Mindy.
Well, thank you, speakers. I hope everyone found this forum as interesting and important as I did today. Let's thank Nationwide Children's Hospital and Action for Children for their support. Our speakers, Judy Mobley, Joy Bivens, Eric Karolak, Shannon Jones, and DeVray Kirkland. And thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week on Wednesday for the Issue 1 discussion and on Friday for the Rick Neal, Steve Stivers debate. Thanks.